Hello. In this video, I'm going to introduce a recipe that I hinted about in the support server earlier today. This recipe was built for the purposes of testing maximum positions within Jackrabbit Relay. Dries and many others have requested the ability of being able to trade only a maximum number of coins simultaneously. So I needed a recipe where I could test that situation, but not be so extreme that it would blow an account up. As you can see, the average is 5% with 14 trade cycles. And this is on a 1 minute time frame for this coin. The recipe itself does take a little more than what I really care for, but nonetheless, it does do an exceptional job. So let's get started with support and resistance. Pretty straightforward, nothing overly special about it, and it's just a very short way of managing. Next, we will look at the moving averages. Now, this has been tuned somewhat uniquely. And you'll notice that I carry 5 candles. I kept it in line with support and resistance so that it continues here as necessary. And where is... Okay, no wonder. It'd help if I clicked on the right. Here we go. As you can see, SSMA, but here's the part that stands out. The multipliers are just above and below, so it pushes the range to the extreme limits, but not going so far out that it messes up the potential of catching a good radius sweep. Now this is momentum driven, but it is not an inverted momentum. I want it to purchase on the way down so that it falls in line with support and resistance. And that is where parabolic stop and reverse kick in. As you can see, it has been tuned to catch these peaks very nicely. Now the tuning isn't really special here, as it does well just as it is. You'll notice it does not keep any candle counts, so there's no overlapping unlike the first 2 modules. And then finally, dollar cost averaging, the part that makes the profits. As you can see, and I'll blow this up a little bit, we'll stretch this out so we can get a good clear look of it. Last profit was 8%, average profit is 5%, duration is roughly 40 days for this chart. Now the max purchases per cycle is 7. I have allotted for 20. So with a $10 budget, this will use $20. $200. Excuse me. Tongue-tied there. Now let's get this back in focus. Now the thing with this strategy that I personally look for is high number of trade cycles and lower number of elapsed durations. For example, 11 trade cycles for 54 days. The profits are good, but it's too slow for my liking. And you'll notice any asset that is not USD based will take horrifically longer. And some assets just aren't that great. So you need to pick and choose which assets will work well for your personal situation. But so far for me, CRV and ENJ do work well for my risk assessment and budget necessities. The one thing that I personally also look at when I want to trade is I like the fact that the last and the average are in line with each other. Now that is not necessarily always going to be the case, but when I see a recipe or an asset with this recipe that comes back with a very low last profit, I'm likely to rank that one lower than an asset like this one that has both a high last profit and a high reasonably average profit. So by using these numbers, you can actually help filter out coins that may not perform well in the long term on the basis of what you might be looking for. Here, of course, 10% last average, 6% average profit. 3 trade cycles, though, that's 1 trade cycle every 11 days roughly. And as you can see, it does somewhat sit. Now, it's not what I would consider overly long, although 11 days can be long for some people depending upon what they're looking for. But still, this would be a reasonable coin choice for me, just because it meets all the criteria I want. And from the standpoint of Relay supporting a fixed number of coins, no matter how many signals it reads, or maximum assets, this is definitely a concept that this coin would fit in very generously. And that's really why this recipe stands out compared to other recipes, is the coins also don't necessarily converge at the same time. So you're likely to get a more robust selection of coin rotations versus the classic convergence of all coins. For example, here, this asset pretty much ended just after this asset began. So there's not a significant dominance between various coin choices. And that's ideal for this kind of a system. Too many signals at once can cause a problem in that you don't always get the best selections compared to having your signals spread out between coins over a wide radius. The other thing that stands out with this recipe is it does well on coins that have a tedious history. As you can see, it does limit exposure very nicely. Let's separate this out and get it so that it's more visible. Only 3 purchases per cycle and a 6% average for 19 days on a coin that is usually very difficult to trade. So there are a lot of good options that this coin opens the door to, or that this recipe opens the door to, in relation to coins that are typically lower quality. Let's go to another coin that I have had a difficult history with. Or backtesting can take several $1,000s, and yet here it does reasonably well. Quite generous considering. The other aspect and prospect that I wanted for this recipe is the ability to function on 1 second. So now let's find a coin that does do just that. Yes, I have spent so much time testing that I know which coins are actually performing halfway decent. And as you can see, even at the 1 second level, it doesn't fire off alerts so extreme that it causes problems with TradingView. And it is still able to pull out outstanding profits compared to this time frame. 11% average profit on the 1 second is quite astounding. It may only have 2 trade cycles, but given that the 1 second time frame is only 3 days for the history of this chart, that's pretty good. And it doesn't overload the alert system, so it shouldn't cause your alerts to stall out. So as you can see, even without Relay, this recipe is definitely one with the books. With Relay, and as it continues to develop, this recipe was definitely hedged against risk in a meaningful way. I will leave this link in the message body below. So with or without maximum positions, this is certainly a good hedge and one worth looking at. Examining the unusual characteristics of each module is also something worth really taking note of, because sometimes subtle changes can really make for good profitability. Until next time.